So hi everyone. I have never done a live on Instagram before, but TikTok was being a little bit annoying today. And I really want to talk to Madeleine Eliot, who is the author of Ballad of Sea and Sky, as well as King and Coven, and the Dark Fairy Tale Retelling series, and there's just so much. So it looks like it's actually working now. So we are, and I'm actually here for it. Maybe Instagram will actually be better. Who knows? All right, so I did accept. Yay, it works now.
Hello.
I have no idea. TikTok can be really silly sometimes, but who cares?
TikTok does not, I don't understand it. And I know it's a generational thing, probably, but
I started on TikTok and then I went on a cruise for a week a couple weeks ago when I couldn't have TikTok. And I was just on Bookstagram and I was like, I kind of like Bookstagram better.
yeah,
And I felt horrible that I was going. But
TikTok is like, it's like chaotic evil for me. It's like, it's just, there's just so much happening all at once and I have no idea. So I just kind of throw videos up there because one day someone was like, hey, you should be on TikTok for book talk. And like, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I am so excited that we got this working because I am absolutely thrilled to talk to you today. Like
Yay.
I was saying to everybody, I was like, I've read all of your books. Like I am just so excited.
Thank you.
It's always kind of crazy and I say this all the time, like when I interview authors that like I read your book and I loved it and like they're willing to talk to me in an interview. Like it's so cool. So thank you so much, Madeleine, for taking time out of your day.
You're welcome. I am similarly, I am always surprised people want to read and talk to me about what I've written. So
That's
it's like a
crazy.
similar experience, honestly.
So we're just gonna get right into it. So if anybody has questions, you can definitely comment below and we will see them and we will go ahead and answer them as long as they're not spoilery and appropriate. But other than that, I do have a list of questions that I ask to just kind of chat and see more about how Madeline writes and her upcoming books, as well as just some fun stuff. So tell us a little bit about how you decided to be an author and what your path to publishing was.
Um, so I did not originally decide to be an author. I was watching um, one of the versions of Pride and Prejudice. I think it was the 6-hour BBC adaptation of Pride and Prejudice
Yes.
with my sister-in-law. And I was thinking to myself, because I can't even remember what I was reading at the time, but I was into romantasy. And I thought to myself, someone should do this with Fae. Like, is there Fae Pride and Prejudice? And like the idea for writing one sort of like, I was like, well, you could totally do the enemies to lovers thing with Mr. Darcy. And, you know, you could have a weird, awkward arranged marriage with Mr. Collins. And so that's how I started writing A Dream of Stars and Darkness was I was like, how would you do this in the world of Fae? And the book didn't flow exactly with Pride and Prejudice, obviously, but I tried to like write nods to it. And I was just doing it for fun at first. And then I like kept writing. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I might actually have a book here. My good friend Aurora, who I actually hadn't seen in a really long time, but I like reached out to her because I know she does NaNoWriMo. I was like, hey, would you read this? Because I think it's kind of okay. And I need like somebody else. And she like jumped at the chance. And yeah, so it was just between the two of us, we got that book written, edited, sort of published. And I was, you know, I was like, this is a little personal project and it's exciting. And I had run another small business that kind of went by the wayside as I picked up this new hobby. I was like, well, I know how to do marketing online. I teach it. So I was like, well, maybe someone will want to read it. And kind of, I knew a little bit about self-publishing, but not a lot. So I did a lot of research and the first publishing, there were all kinds of problems, but we got it out there. And yeah, so that's kind of, it was all trial and error and kind of just a big experiment.
And what was your first published book?
That was A Dream of Stars and Darkness.
It was. Okay.
Yeah. And then that was like, I knocked 3 books out really quickly at that point. And I'm not even sure how, honestly. Like, it's all sort of a blur. Like, I have small children and like the first year of their lives is a blur. It's the same with like my career as an author. Is the first year is sort of a blur.
Well, I am so glad you kept going because you have just gotten so many amazing different stories and books out. I'm just so excited to see everything that's, coming out as well. So tell us a little bit about how you write. So do you plot? Do you pants? Do you
Oh.
quilt? What do you do?
It kind of has evolved a little. When I started with Adosad, it was all just seat of my pants, like what would happen next if this were Pride and Prejudice. And then as I started doing more, I realized that I needed to have more of an outline, especially when I got to when I started writing the second book in that series. I was like, well, it needs to be different. So I'm going to need to like know where I'm going. But like my outlines are extremely vague. And then usually as I write, I thicken up the outlines a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So like I have a working outline. There have been many, many occasions where the book has taken a turn that I did not expect because it's just the words that come out. So like, for example, in Ballad of Sea and Sky, the character of Ranach, the Kelpie, he was not in my original outline. He just kind of appeared one day in the book. I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're writing about a water horse now. So
I love that. I love that idea of just like because I've heard like a lot of authors say that like it turned out differently than like I thought it was going to and it just went that way and like I think that's such a cool way of describing like a process because it's like even you're figuring it out as it
yeah,
goes. So it's kind of cool.
a lot of it is the characters make, and some of it is the characters make decisions. I'm like, why are you doing this? But I can't stop you. It's honestly strangely like the characters have a mind of their own sometimes, and they're just filtering through me, and then I have to deal with the ramifications of their poor decisions. So
Yeah. Well, can you tell us what you enjoy most about writing fantasy? Because it's pretty clear that you enjoy fantasy.
I do. I view it as like escapism primarily. Like I love the idea that there's a different world with different boundaries and access to magic and all these things that we don't have in our real world. And I live a pretty normal, boring, mundane life in my day-to-day life. So this is like my secret alter ego nighttime personality, and I just get to like pretend. It's basically just
Hmm.
playing pretend and like then polishing up your pretend play to make it publishable.
That's a great way to describe it. And I like the alter ego thing too,
Yeah, it.
because it's like after dark, after the kids go to bed. This
Yep,
is what
yep.
I am,
And
right?
Madeleine Eliot's a pen name, and so like on in my personal life, I go by a completely different name, and then in my book life, I'm online and I answer to Madeleine, and it's kind of like she's two different people. Honestly, there's real me and there's author me, um, and I have like split personality disorder.
um, and what made you choose the name Madeleine
It's
Eliot?
actually my children's middle names.
Oh, that's really
So I
cute.
really struggled. I wasn't going to go with a pen name originally. And my first couple posts I put under my real name, which I've since deleted. But I'm a public school teacher, and so
Uh,
my husband was like, "What's going to happen if one of your students, because they will find it? What if they come and bring the spicy book to school and start reading it aloud?" It's like, well, you're right. Yes, I should come up with a pen name. So I played with a couple different options, and that was the one that felt right. And I figure the royalties will pay for their therapy when they realize what I've done. So
that's so funny. That is so funny.
yeah, but
Um,
we named them. We wanted to use author middle names for our children. So Madeline is from Madeleine L'Engle, and
mhm,
Elliot is T.S. Eliot, and those
mhm.
are two of our favorite authors. So I kind of stole their names to be my
That
name.
is so cool. I love that. Let's see. So Amelia says that that's my favorite thing about reading fantasy. It's an escape.
Yep.
We have someone who loves Ren,
Yeah.
and someone else who really likes your pen name. So it's really cool.
Thank you.
Um, so what do you need in your writing space to stay focused? How do you stay focused and on task?
Honestly, it's been a real challenge for the last like 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, I would, and I think prior to like to Wear a Demon Crown, the third book in the King Coven series, I was just like on fire, like pushing books out left and right. And then I think I hit like a mental wall of
Yeah.
burnout. And I remember, and like even though like I finished writing Bosis and I had finished writing Golden Shadow, and then
Mm-hmm.
I churned out a little Christmas PNR novella for funsies. And then I remember it was like December 15th that I finished writing that. And then I hit some kind of, or I published it, and then I just could not write for a month. Um,
Mm.
so it's been a struggle. Normally I need to have like a reason to need to escape, and I need to have like the internal inspiration. It's really hard to force it, and I don't like forcing it because
Mm-hmm.
it makes it feel inauthentic,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not fun. Um, there are deadlines I've set for myself that require me to do some forced writing, but luckily, this book, the sequel to Ballad of Sea and Sky, is the last. I have an official deadline that I set myself for, and I have kind of decided I need to stop setting myself deadlines
Mm-hmm.
and just like write the books first and then figure out the publishing timeline. The problem is I get so excited. I'm just like, I want to share. And I have like so many secret covers and secret projects I have for down the line. And I want to tell the world, but I can't because it's bad marketing. So,
Well, at least, I mean, I think that deadlines, I mean, you know who needs a deadline is George R. R. Martin, because
yeah,
he's just not even going to bother at this point because he's like, I'm good. Like,
yeah,
but I need to know what happens because I've read all those books, so like I need to know.
yeah.
So it's good in a way, but I think deadlines, I don't know, for myself, I think that that would put pressure on me that takes the fun out of writing.
Yeah, and the first three books I wrote, I didn't set deadlines because, like, I wrote Out and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to publish this, and I'm going to start writing book two while I'm editing book one. And by the time I was ready to, like, when I published it, I already had the first few chapters of the next book written, and then I had finished the next book in a month. So I was like, I'm going to publish it next month.
Mm.
And then the same happened with book three, and then with To Hunt a Demon King, I published that a month earlier than my intended
Oh,
date because
wow.
it was done, and I was excited and I have no chill. And so, and then I like, and I love working with the Unplugged Book Box, but Unplugged Book Box wanted to do the whole trilogy.
Mhm.
And that's when I set my first deadlines. And that's when the trouble began, was setting myself
Gotcha.
deadlines, totally self-imposed. Like I set those deadlines, not them. Um, but it became much harder to work to a deadline because I felt the pressure, and
Mm.
especially because it was the later books in the series. The third book in a trilogy, I decided while writing the third book in that trilogy, is the worst because you put the
Yeah.
most work into it, and it is the most criticized and the least read.
Hmm.
Because like if book two isn't good, it
Then
turns
they,
people off. They don't read book
yep.
three, but then you struggle to put out book three. So that was rough. And then like this series, I didn't intend to set deadlines, but then I did set myself a deadline because I have no chill. And so now I'm reaping the rewards of that. So yes, going to try to have more chill in the future.
It's good to have some element of
Yeah.
chill, but I have to say that I like duets and duologies so much more. Like
Well,
I would prefer that over a series or a trilogy. Like it's just feels good.
and I've not read that many of them because trilogies kind of seem like the industry
Yeah.
standard for fantasy romance. I decided Bosis was going to be a trilogy, partly because I was like, I'm never writing it, or it's going to be a duology. I was like, I'm never writing a trilogy ever again after dealing with the King and Coven, like the stress of book three. And then when I was outlining kind of what the major plot points, and again, I say outlining in the loosest term. It's like literally you can. It's on my phone, my notes app on my phone. It's like a list of 8 things.
Wow.
um, when I was outlining the major beats of the story, I was like, this is 2 books worth of stuff. I
Hmm.
could maybe stretch to 3, but it would be a struggle, and I don't want to do that again. So I plan it to be 2 slightly longer books if necessary, rather than 3 not as full books.
Hmm.
And I don't see myself change like the plot, the whole story I've created, like it will be resolved in book 2.
Mm.
I could see myself maybe doing a little novella with some like side stuff, like an epilogue novella, maybe. Um, but yeah, although I do have future potential trilogies. One of them would be 3 interconnected standalones, which is easier to do
Love it.
because the stories are different. The other one, I designed 3 gorgeous covers, and I really want to use all 3 covers, but I don't know that I actually have a story for all 3 covers. So
Well, that can come. We can figure that out,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's for down the line, future me.
We have people saying that they love the it's King and Crown,
King and
right?
Coven,
King Coven.
King and Coven, yeah.
That they love that series and that they other people also like duets. So, my final question is, what is your kryptonite other than setting deadlines for yourself?
Yes, my writing
Yeah,
kryptonite. Oh
what
God.
gets in your way?
Can I say life?
Yeah,
Like, oh,
just
oh, actually,
balancing roles.
I'll tell you what my current kryptonite is. It's like, it's stupid little games on my phone is my kryptonite. Like, because I work full time and then I come home and I have kids. And so like, I just need to shut off my brain. And for a while, writing was me shutting off like the academic part of my brain and putting on the fantasy part of the brain, which worked. And then like I re-downloaded Oregon Trail for,
I
and like all the little
love the Oregon
stupid
Trail.
Kairosoft games on iTunes, and they are so addictive and like easy and require zero thought. And it's very easy to like, oh, I'm gonna just play one little game of this instead of write, you know, 1,000 words of my book. So it's very easy. So that's kind of, I'm dealing with trying to get that out of my system and still enjoy the writing. So the writing has been harder this year, which is kind of a bummer. And I was very worried that it would be like, yes, they have Oregon
They
Trail.
do, yeah.
New, it's on Apple Arcade and it's amazing. It is much harder to die of dysentery, but way easier to die of psycho. But that's like, I pushed out so many books so quickly that I kind of expected that I would keep up at that pace. And like, I have a very obsessive personality and I get really into things. And I realized that I am now on the outer edge of that obsessive wave of creativity. And now I have to come up with something that's more sustainable because I still have ideas and I want to write more. But I need to do it in a way that's going to be manageable. So.
Got you. Okay, so we can go in and talk about whichever book you want. So we can either talk about your spicy dark retellings, or we can talk about Hymn of Breath and Bone, whatever you want to talk about. But we'll start there because those are ones that are coming out.
Yep, I'm open to either. Blood and Roses just came out Friday.
Friday.
Yes. And that one I've been very pleased with how that one has done. And I like the little spicy dark retellings. I decided they would be novellas because I didn't want to stress out about word count. So they were my answer to setting myself deadlines and being stressed out about how many words is in the book, because like it has to be 80,000 in my mind for it to count. And if it's like 78,000, it's just too short. But I don't worry about word count so much with the novellas because I really don't care. And I know they're not, I know they're not going to sell as well because novellas don't sell as well. So it actually kind of relieves the pressure and they're more fun to write because there's no pressure.
Yeah, so. I get that. I do get that. So let's go and let's do a line from each. So your dark spicy retellings, what is one sentence that describes those?
Like all of them combined?
Yes, just like the general, I mean, we can, it would be like the Nightshade sisters, blah, 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 right? Probably.
I mean, they're really classic fairy tales with a spicy romantasy twist. And I really like exploring in all of them. There's some element of the fairy tale that's bent. So I try not to give too much away about either of the plots. But in all of them, it's like there's nods to the original fairy tale, but it's not exactly the original fairy tale. And they all follow this series of 7 sisters who originally were supposed to be like the 7 dwarves.
Yeah.
So, and actually this book, Blood and Roses, was the original brain child, like baby in my brain of what this, like I was like, I'm gonna write a story that's like a Snow White retelling with an assassin and 7 assassin sisters instead of 7 dwarves. And then that idea died because life, and it was 2018. And then I was like, hell, I can do this now. I've written a different book, so I can write this one now.
I think that's a good way to describe it. And I was saying, I don't remember because we had little technical difficulties. And one of them, I was talking about how I thought that your first, spicy retelling, I don't think I've ever read anything as far as the Goldilocks. So I thought that was really cool. And that was really awesome. And I ended up loving the male character more than I thought I was going to in the beginning.
And again, I did not come up with the Goldilocks first. Yeah. I can't even remember exactly how I decided that one should go first. But the idea came to mind. I knew I'd spent a long time trying to figure out how would I retell 7 fairy tales and in what order would they go and which sister would be which. And it felt right as a introduction to the overall lore because the lore will get more complicated. Not really complicated because they're novellas, but like they're all interconnected. And there's an overarching bad guy who has not been introduced yet, but has been
Mhm.
present, which there have been nods to. So, um, and I can't even remember exactly why, but I was like, I need to write a bear shifter. And I just needed to write it, like to get it out of my system. And I was like, bears have a weird peen and I need to write that. So um yeah, it was fun. I had considered dabbling in monster romance. And honestly, this is probably as much like slightly weird peen as probably as much
Yeah,
monster as I'm gonna go. But it was a fun, like, little difference to work in.
I read today. I read Serpent, and I know I say today, I am nuts. Everybody knows I'm nuts. I've read almost 500 books this year already. So today I read Serpent of Sky and Flame by Rebecca
Mhm.
F. Kenney. Um, and I thought that it was going to be a little bit too much with the dragon shifter, like monster romance, but I actually ended up liking it. So I was like, and then Bride by Ali Hazelwood.
Yes.
Everyone was talking about what that thing is that dogs do, and I didn't know what it was. And my somebody I know, she breeds dogs, and I was like, can you just tell me what this is before I get into this book, because I just need to know what's
Are we
going
talking
on.
about non?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just need to know what's going on.
Yeah. Interestingly, during the King and Coven series, there was a push from some of my street team because snakes don't have a they have what's called a hemipene. It's like two penises,
Oh,
which I'm saying on the internet,
snakes.
which I can't
Oh.
believe this is my life. Um, and they were like, "Oh my god, Carnan, you must give him this." And I tried. I really tried to write a scene and I just could not do it. And in the end I ended up poking fun at it within the book itself, which
Yeah.
worked out way better. Um but yeah, I do have some potential plans for some slightly less completely humanoid characters. But as far as like, I'm not going to be writing. I know Lindsay's like, huh? I'm not writing any Duskwalkers anytime soon, or random incorporeal alien creatures
That's
or
fair.
things like that. Like I do need to stick with somewhat recognizable anatomy.
Got you.
So
I can see that. Let's see. So we have cute but low key stabby elf siblings as a way
that
to describe
totally accurate.
those books.
Yes.
And then Bianca loves retellings, which is amazing. And now we know that about snakes. So I know this is like, I mean, having so many different, worlds out, I can imagine this is going to be a really tough question. But if you had to choose a character who is your favorite to write, who is that
Oh
and why?
God, that's so
I
hard.
know.
Oh, so hard. Favorite to write. Honestly, it might have been Carnan as my favorite to write, only because he kind of was one of those characters that just like appeared in my head and I was like, yes, I'm doing this.
Mhm.
I can't even really describe. But also I'm torn because Hadrian was like my first book boyfriend
Mhm.
that I invented. And I will always have a soft spot for him. And he was like, like I didn't even know what a shadow daddy was when I wrote him. I was like, oh, I've written a shadow daddy. Yes. I didn't know what that was. That's really hard. As far as like female characters, though, I think like I've enjoyed writing all of them. I really liked writing Celine in A Dream of Frost and Fury because she was troubled and
Mhm.
had difficulties that she was trying to overcome and insecurities, which I, have insecurities. The one I think I most like is probably Marina, except I'm like way not into adventure or putting myself out there. So I'd be like I wrote Marina as here's a character who also has a chronic illness, who struggles with health, but is willing to do all the things that I feel like can't physically do in my
Mhm.
actual body. But she can do them because she's a fantasy character, even though she still struggles with those
Mhm.
things. So it's been, and writing her has convinced me that I need to be including chronic illness in more of my characters because it's such a huge part of people's lives, and it's a huge part of
Mhm.
my life. And people really resonate with that.
No, and I totally agree. I think having representation just matters so much. I mean, in many ways, right? It's helps people, like you said, relate to the characters, and it's kind of cool to kind of put that part of you into a character and have that like live on like
Yeah.
forever. It's kind
And
of
it was
cool.
it was an interesting experience writing it because I remember one of my alpha readers saying, "Oh my gosh, you described this experience of her not being able to breathe so well," and I'm like, all I did was describe my like life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like people don't realize what kinds of things you go through when you suffer from some kind of chronic illness.
Hmm.
So being able to put that on the page and like articulate it to people was kind of validating.
That's awesome. That must feel like really good to
Yeah.
have somebody say that to you.
Yeah. Especially when I'm like, somebody I saw earlier asked if I was sick, and I'm like, I'm always sick. Like, I've just
Yeah.
had a bad health, like life, basically. So yeah, I now I get to inflict that on all of you.
And we will happily take it. What was the most challenging part of writing generally this these worlds? What was the hardest part about creating them?
Definitely like the in writing itself, the hardest thing was finishing that I've experienced so far was finishing the King Coven series, just because it felt
Mm,
like so much pressure to make that final book work and to make the world work and to have like everybody's like, well, your heroine has to be a badass, but also can't be like just naturally good at everything, but also has to be this and that. And there's just so much like, especially because of like, the Sarah J. Maas effect, like everybody has
mm-hmm.
expectations for how the characters should be. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. That was the hardest writing. As far as like authorship in general, I would say the imposter syndrome, like
Mm-hmm.
constantly feeling like I'm looking at like my screen here and like I know I wrote these books like in my head, but deep down I'm like, but did I really? Like, are you sure you did that? Did you really? And it doesn't, it honestly feels like a fake life. Some of the time I'm like, oh yes, I wrote X number of books. And, but it's like like I don't feel like I'm a real author. Like
Mm-hmm.
when people say I'm an author, I'm like, I'm a teacher and I dabble in authorship. So, but so yeah, I would say like especially being an indie author with no representation and no publishing house, and I have amazing teams who are wonderful volunteers, and but I'm entirely reliant on finding my own support system, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't have like a company to fall back on to help pay bills. Or I mean, I work full time as well, so these books are not paying the bills for sure. But it's hard to feel like you are actually a real author in a space that has largely been dominated by traditionally published authors.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's so hard because I mean, that's why I do these, interviews, and that's why like indie authors, like I finally figured out like a great tagline was indie authors are my Roman Empire, because I would literally just like go for it, with indie authors, because I didn't even know what indie was until October, like of 2023 when I joined Book Talk. Really, Kristen Becker Ritchie, who now are trad published with the Addicted series, I read them as self-published, and I really barely even knew what that was at that point. So I think more people need to know about,
Yeah.
like, there's so much hard work that goes into being an indie author. It's not just writing the
And
book.
especially like having the confidence to publish as an indie author. Like I remember I was writing, my first book,
Yeah.
thinking to myself, well, am I gonna have to like query? I like it's gonna take years. And it wasn't until like I was like slightly on Bookstagram at that point. And I was like, what is an indie author? I had no idea either. And I went through once I realized, oh, these are people who are self-publishing. Like, could I do that? I was like, but there's so much stigma around indie authoring. Like you're self-published. That just means that it's not very good. And I was like, well, I can't do that because that's just automatically going to tell people it's not very good. And I went through and on a whim, I decided to check the publishing houses of some of my favorite romance authors I've been reading. Every single one of them was self-published,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't realize until I was thinking about doing it myself. And I was like, well, where are they published? I was like, oh my gosh, they all did it themselves. I love these books. I had no idea they were independently published. I could totally do that.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. We do have some comments here about people saying that you're one of their favorites, and yes, you did write all that. Um, let's see. And like indie authors put so much love, effort, and energy into their work. And I totally agree. And I think it's like whenever like I'm in a reading slump, like luckily you had like books out that were coming out or that I had like as an arc, because whenever like I was in a reading slump like the last like few months, I was like, I'm gonna read a Madeleine book because
Aw.
that's what it and it did, and it does.
Yeah,
Um
I kind of started writing them as they're solid, and I try and take pride in this, even though
yeah.
like the imposter syndrome part of me stings a little. But mine are they are solid 4-star
Yeah.
reads to get you out of a slump. They are not great literary works of fiction, but they are fun and they are pretty well put together, you know. And that's kind of like the consensus in my reviews is they're pretty solid 4-star reads, and I'm okay with that.
You're okay with
I'm
that.
okay with that.
Um
Obviously, I would love to like, you know, be a Rebecca Yarros or something like that, but also I feel like there's a lot of downsides with that kind of fame too. So
Agreed. Definitely agreed. And so you have so many amazing lines and so many amazing words and stories that you write, but do you have any favorite quotes from any of your books?
oh my gosh, people always ask me when I'm like doing signed copies, like to put a favorite quote. It's so hard to actually come up with favorites just because it's A, hard to remember that I wrote the lines without thinking it was someone else.
Yeah.
And B, it's hard to remember them all. But I think like again, my first book, it was, you know, Mother Vervain, like this, the grandmotherly wizened lady saying, never travel the realms without your tea. That was like, these can be punchy and funny and weird. And yes, you should always drink your tea, because I'm on like a major lifetime tea kick. And I was like, everybody should drink tea. You shouldn't go without tea. That one has always stayed. It's not the sexiest of the lines I've ever written, but it is one of the ones that like, that's kind of like my little mantra to myself is, you've got your tea, you can do this. All you
Hmm.
need is your tea.
Like that.
Yeah.
I like it. And a lot of in your Etsy shop, a lot of like the stickers and stuff have like really cool like branded like quotes and cool things like that. So if you haven't seen Madeline's Etsy, you should go there. And so if you're sometimes when we write, we picture our characters. You know, as certain people, certain actors, they have certain looks. I know that we have beautiful character art like we do here. Let me grab the book again. I mean, obviously, this is absolutely beautiful art. So this is artistic wise who these characters would be.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any people wise that you think that they would look like?
Um, okay, I don't know if this is going to sound like terrible, but like I have pictured literally, and that was Lindsay at Honey Faye. That was her art.
Oh, really?
Um,
I didn't want to
yes,
say it because I wasn't sure.
yes. No,
But this,
she drew that originally as a fan piece for me, and then I was like, could you rework this as an actual cover?
like,
And she did.
it's
Um,
beautiful.
yes, and
This
she's
is
already
the special edition from Barnes and Noble.
yes, and we've got the cover for the special edition of the second book ready too,
Right.
and also done by her. Um, yeah, all of my for the girls, not so much. Weirdly, it's harder to picture them as actors or actresses. The guys, literally every single last one of them is Henry Cavill. He could play all of them. Just throw a different wig on him, maybe slightly change the accent, and it's Henry Cavill. Like
I like that.
that's just who I picture when I think of like a male lead is Henry Cavill, because I love him deeply, and if he were to show up at my house, I would absolutely run off with him. Um, this my love for him is well known enough that my students who don't know about this side of my life, um, one of their projects. I work at a project-based learning school, and one of their projects was to pull pranks on teachers, and so I was one of the victims, and they had to do a math related prank. So they had to figure out the surface area of one of my walls, and they got me out of the room. And when I came back, the surface area, the entirety of my wall was covered in a giant picture of Henry Cavill. Um, so it's this is yeah, they're all Henry Cavill.
So all Henry Cavill. Got it.
That's
Okay.
basically like if you could just clone him and have him play all the parts. I think he
Yep.
would still do a great job at all of them too.
I, I think so.
Maybe with
Oh
the
yeah.
exception of Aspen, because he's blonde, and I can't see Henry Cavill as a blonde.
Wait, was it he blonde in The Witcher?
No, he's got white hair in The
Oh, it's
Witcher.
white. Yeah.
That's like Caspian style white hair. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I could maybe see like maybe like a Heath Ledger for a couple of them too.
Oh,
Throw in a Heath
okay.
Ledger.
I see it. I see
Completely unattainable and or dead actors.
it. Oh Lord. So we're going to move on to the last part of the interview today. And it's going to be some fun questions. So if anybody has any fun questions or questions for Madeleine, please pop those in the chat. Everyone is agreeing that we all love Henry Cavill. So other than reading and writing, of course, what are some other things that you enjoy doing in your life?
Gosh, I don't really have time for a lot of other things. Like I said, playing stupid little iPhone games is a hobby. Um, we my husband and I like to watch this really dumb show called Naked and Afraid.
I love
On
Nick and Afraid.
Okay, it's like we found it on our honeymoon and then didn't watch it for like 10 years, and we've now just been like binge watching
I
it again.
love that.
So good. I was like actually thinking to myself as I was watching the episode, I'm like, could you write Naked and Afraid but with Faye? Could it be done? I bet it could.
Good.
Hashtag challenge.
If anyone could write it, it's you.
Yeah, right, Naked and Afraid but with Faye. And like I have young kids, so a lot of time is spent doing kid stuff. I used to paint actually quite a lot, and my previous side hustle was, which was just out of a hobby, was making little wooden toys for kids. And then my kids kind of grew out of that stage, and I started writing spicy novels. So that all fell apart. But occasionally, I still like to do like artistic stuff, and my daughter loves crafting, so she's often like asking me to help her make bracelets and things like
Oh,
that.
that's awesome. Um, I think that you're very right in when you say like, when do I have time to do everything? Because there's just so much stuff. Um, and we have a question, which actually is one of my questions, so we're just going to pop there now. Any sort of signings or book conventions or anything that you're going to be at possibly
Yeah,
in the future?
I would love to. I did apply for Steamy LitCon and was rejected. So, um, which is a shame because it's right by my house. Like I literally live there and it would have been so easy. Because I work full time, it's really hard for me to get to
Yeah.
conventions because I'm a teacher, so I can't just like take random days. And especially for like, I'm going to go and sign spicy books during the school week. So it's really hard. There's not a lot in the summer. And especially like as an indie author, it's hard to set up signings too. I actually did reach out to the Lost Bookshop in Los Angeles, and they were like, "Oh yeah, sure, it's $500." I'm like, "Oh, maybe not then," because
Lord.
like that's a lot of money for someone who has no agent and no
Right.
guarantee of books from that, and I would have to do all the hype and publishing and promotion myself and stuff. So currently, no. But I have always said, like, if I am traveling anywhere else in the United States, I'm currently in Southern California, but if I'm elsewhere, I will happily shout out on Instagram, hey, I'm in this area. If you are here, hit me up and I'll meet you at a Barnes and Noble or something,
That's awesome.
or a coffee shop or something. I would love to meet like readers. I think it's so wild that people out there read my books and that like people I've never met have like read my stuff and like some of them like it. That's so crazy to me. So
Awesome. Well, I definitely think that I don't know, maybe we all just have to write and support this, this spicy whatever, and be like, what's wrong with you? Like, you need to have Madeline. Um, this is my favorite question. I always get amazing recommendations. So, what are some books or authors that you would recommend?
So, especially authors that like helped me on this journey, I really love Sonia Odette, who did the Faye Isle series, and I love her series of fairy tale retellings, which are full novels, not novellas like mine. I really like Elise Kova, and
Lovely
was
Coven.
her Married to Magic
Yeah,
series. I really enjoyed. I also like, she's not as well known, but Sylvia Mercedes.
heard
Um,
of her.
she has a couple series that I liked, and they were different. And I have to catch up on her like last book in her series, but she has a couple good ones. And then like if you're into PNR, I like Juliet Cross, the Stay a Spell series,
Mm-hmm.
which are just, they're just fun. I'm trying to think if there's any. Obviously, I have a ton of like indie author
Yeah.
friends I've made here, all after the fact, kind of, and read their books after I knew them as an author rather than the other way around. But those are some of the ones that like I read first before I like entered the world of romantasy. And I'm sure that I will like come up with others. I do most of my reading on Kindle,
Yeah.
so it's like luckily there's like new books being published every 8 seconds, so
Yeah.
there's always something new to read.
Well, I definitely have to check out some of these. I know that um, Sylvia Mercedes I've heard of. Juliet Cross, I think I read the first one, Wolf Gone Wild.
Yes. Yeah.
And then she's coming out with a new something in like September, I saw, because she's going to be at Romantasy BookCon. And I'm trying, well, I actually did. I've read at least one book by every author who's going. And I saw that she had a new thing coming out, and that looked pretty good. So I was going to try that one.
Yeah. And
Um,
then of course, like I, not that I like to claim knowledge of JLA before JLA became big, but I was reading JLA long before From Blood and Ash.
oh
And
yeah,
like
like the
I
Lux
read her when she was,
series. That's what I
yeah,
read.
I read all of her young adult series, the Harbinger series, the opposite, like the Alien series. I can't remember what it was
Yeah,
called.
Lux. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Lux.
I
I read
loved
all
Lux.
of those, and then From Blood and Ash came out. I'm like, oh, she's doing Romantasy, and suddenly everybody knows who she is. I'm like, I knew her first. I
I know
never met her or talked to
she
her, but
does
I
a
read all of her
Polycon.
stuff.
Which I had no idea that a Polycon was her thing.
Yeah,
I literally had no idea.
yeah.
I definitely want to go to that because everybody seems to be going, so I'll have to go
I know.
next time.
Stupid school.
Um, I know, and I mean I'm a mental health counselor, so people are always going to
Yeah,
need help. You can't just leave.
yeah.
Um, so if you had to share some advice for aspiring authors or a younger Madeline, what would you tell that person?
Just do the thing. Like I got, like it took me years and years and years from thinking when I was younger, oh, I want to publish a book someday, to actually doing it, because of fears and beliefs that I wasn't going to be able to do it and wasn't going to be successful. And then when I finally let go of, I don't really care if I'm successful. I just want a few people to read the book and like it. Like it made everything open up for me. So I think just like doing it, and also like finding and nourishing a really
Mm.
good team of support, like both of readers and of people you trust to like read early drafts. That's hugely important, especially when you don't have like a traditional editor or a publishing house to help you. Like having, not just finding those people, but nourishing them as your community is really important too.
I think that that's so important because also kind of having that group, it's, and especially if it's other authors, like they've been through it and they know exactly what it's like. And they can
Yep.
kind of, I've seen like so many people like on here, like indie authors being like, hey, like if you have any questions, just like ask me, let me know. Like that's just
Yep.
wonderful that
I
we're
like,
not
I
like
actually
all
love it.
competing, like cutthroat. Like, we're like, no, like I'll help you. Like
Yeah.
you have a story, like let's
And
go.
like, I mean, this is like maybe the teacher in me, but I love when people slide into my DMs. I'm like,
Me
hi, I see
too.
you're an author. I don't know how to do this. And I'm like, I will tell you everything I've learned. Give me like 800 pages of text messages and I will give you all of my notes. Um, but I enjoy doing that, especially because I did not have that. So it's so
Yeah.
valuable for me to be able to do that for other people too. So yes, please do slide into my DMs. Ask me all your questions. I promise you will not annoy me.
Let's see. So do you play music while you write?
No, I do not. I am like,
Why?
I for whatever reason, I wish I could be one of these music and focus people, but I cannot focus while I'm listening to music. And I think
Hmm.
it's because I'm really into music. When I sing and play instruments, and my husband's a musician, so like I can't multitask with music. Like when the music is on, it's just the music.
Mm.
And I've never been able to like read or study or anything with music. And my students do it all the time, and it drives me crazy. I'm like, you are not focusing. I know you're not, but they are, and it works for their brains. It just has never worked for mine. I honestly wish it would, because I feel like it would be really great inspiration. Um, it's more often that I like hear something and I'm like, ooh, those are the vibes. And like
Mm.
I like putting together like reels with aesthetic reels with music and stuff like that, but I can't for the life of me write with it. I've tried, and it just, my brain has to compartmentalize and I can't focus. So
No, I totally feel that. And when people say they can write with words, I don't know what that must be like because I will write the words that I'm hearing. So that must be great that somebody can do
I
that.
know I'm
Uh,
like I'm very jealous of people who can do it. I
yeah,
cannot.
me too. And so the final question of tonight is there anywhere that you have traveled or want to travel or anywhere in the world that inspires the worlds that you have created?
Oh gosh. Um, there are so many places I would love to go in like Europe. And I was actually born in Scotland.
Oh,
So like I grew up with a castle like 2 blocks from my house. Um, like a crumbling castle. It wasn't a great
yeah.
castle, but a castle nonetheless. So like, and a lot of I think the place that inspired like my idea of like one of the fairy tale retellings I'm going to be writing involves the Pied Piper. And when I think about it's going to take place in a village, and the thing I keep picturing when I think of that village is Prague. And I went in 2015, and like my memory of like being on the Charles Bridge and like all of this architecture that was untouched by World War II and was still from like the original thousands, that was pretty cool. And yeah, I like the idea of the old world being involved. But honestly, a lot of it is also just like stuff you've read in other books and seen in movies and dreamt up in your head. Like so much of what we think of as fantasy is like medieval Europe, which was probably not as nice as it is in fantasy novels. But yeah, I guess if I could travel anywhere and wasn't afraid of the plane falling out of the sky or things like that, then yes, there would be the older parts of Europe that are not as often explored.
I love Europe. It's just like so cool to like look at something and be like, wow, like that's been there for like thousands of years, like not
Yeah,
just hundreds.
yeah,
So cool.
yeah.
Well, I am so glad that we got this working, and actually, I think I kind of like Instagram Live better.
I'm
So
telling you,
I might
TikTok is
actually
like
switch.
just too much. TikTok's too much.
Yeah, I think it's just because you're wonderfully popular and write wonderful books, but I just think that like maybe it just like pushes it more because I literally have probably I've never had like at least six people watch the whole thing. So I
Hey,
mean, I think it's both. I think it's a combo of maybe Instagram pushes more, but also that you're just very loved and very popular, and it's
I
wonderful.
for sure have more people here following me on Instagram than on TikTok, where it's like 100 people who
Yeah.
accidentally found my page. So
Well, I'm glad that we went and were able to get this working. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to just chat with me and talk about these books. And I just can't wait to see what else you have coming out. I'm so
thank
excited for you.
you. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
having me and for suggesting.
You're welcome, Madeline. Have a great rest of your night. Bye,
You
everyone.
too. Bye.